The Cove, it won an Oscar.
I do want to say that we try to do the story legally. I thought all the possibilities of what could happen, and it kept me up at night.
Well, I couldn't watch it. Dolphins being slaughtered in a sea of blood. This is the Science Show on RN. Now, as Australia takes on Japan in the international court, disputing so-called scientific whaling, we return to the Cove in a campaign just launched to save those other whale cousins, the dolphins. Alistair Lucas is a leading banker in Melbourne, and he also chairs the Macfarlane Burnett Institute. In the beginning, what really set you off on this path?
Well, really, I'd have a vague knowledge of it through The Cove. It's a wonderful film I recommend to everyone, and won an Academy Award, but I hadn't seen the film in full, and my daughter brought it to my attention, and that led to her deciding to go to Taiji to see these killings, and I decided to go with her, and I spent, I have to say, the worst week of my life in the most horrible place in the world, this little town on the east coast of Japan, and we witnessed for a week these appalling atrocities.
And why do they kill them like that?
Well, it's the cheapest way. Dolphins are large animals. It is quite hard to shoot them, and guns and bullets are expensive. That's the only conclusion, that the way they kill them is most efficacious in a money sense. This is a money-making operation. It's not traditional, it's not cultural, it is all about making money for a very small group of so-called fishermen in this town.
And what happens to the dolphins?
It's an interesting business because they herd the dolphins into this cove in a very traumatic way. The way they do it, we're using a wall of sound, confuses the animals. They herd them into this small cove, they keep them overnight, so they're disoriented and very hungry. Then you watch the buyers come. So buyers come from aquariums, really in Japan and China, we believe the Middle East, and the handsome ones, the juveniles who look good, not the babies, and not the older ones, not the ordinary ones, but the handsome ones are bought for aquariums. And it may be that they're the unlucky ones. They get to live and they go in unregulated aquariums in those places. Of course, Australian and American aquariums have long since banned buying a dolphin from Taiji. The rest of them are butchered in a very traumatic way. It's terrible to watch, and it's actually terrible to listen to, but they use a metal rod. It's based on pithing. We can all remember having to pith frogs in biology class, and they seem to think that this is a humane way. They've argued that it is, but what it involves is forcing a metal rod into the top of the dolphin, just behind the blowhole. They force the metal rod in, they hold the tail, tie the tails, hold the animal at the nose and force this metal rod in. The animal goes into convulsions of pain. They'll leave the metal rod in for a period, they'll pull it out, they'll then hammer a wooden chock into the wound to prevent blood staining the cove. And we've all seen the photographs of blood in the cove. That no longer happens because they use these wooden chocks that they hammer into the wound. And it's very traumatic. It's plainly just enormously painful for the animal. And in fact, scientists from the University of Bristol in the UK and City University of New York carried out quite an extensive study. Their conclusions were that the method of killing was profoundly distressing, traumatic and painful. And it clearly is. When the killing starts, you hear the screaming. You can't get within a couple of 100 metres, but you hear the screaming. It's the most traumatic thing I've ever been witness to or experienced.
And would the so-called fishermen, the people who are doing this work, in any way distressed by what's happening?
They call them vermin. They run an argument that these are vermin of the sea that eat the fishing stocks. There's no evidence of that. None whatsoever. In fact, the evidence is to the contrary. They treat them like logs. I mean, you'd liken it to a logging operation. They kick them, they push them, they throw them on the beach. They have no concern for these wonderful creatures as sentient beings. None whatsoever.
Why would they need dolphin meat? We ask sometimes why they need whale meat, because they're the same sort of animal. Why would they need dolphin meat at all?
Well, it's interesting because the dolphin meat is actually not a very important part of it. The economics is driven by the aquarium trade. So maybe 10% of the animals go to the aquarium. So to get a sense of it, maybe we watched several pods of about 20 come in. So it runs for 6 months of the year every day. Of the 20, say, a typical pod, maybe a couple with the handsome ones, as I said, would go off to aquariums. They may sell for up to $150,000, $200,000. That drives the economics. The meat is a byproduct, and they go into supermarkets in Japan. We searched a number of supermarkets for dolphin meat. It's hard to find. It most probably is relabeled as whale meat, which is more acceptable. Some of it apparently goes into being pet food.
So, essentially for human food, it's unnecessary.
Oh, it's absolutely unnecessary. The quantity of animals, they're killing about 2,000 a year. You know, that's just infinitesimal in terms of the food requirements of Japan. They're absolutely unnecessary for human protein intake.
And what has the town felt about the film that was made and the notoriety around the world?
Look, you need to understand a little bit about the town. You need to really go to the town, because the town is a dolphin town. It is bizarre. The town gates are big archways with dolphins on them. It's a little harbour, and ferries go across the harbour. The ferries are great big dolphins with happy, smiling dolphin faces and dolphin tails. They sell dolphin models in the supermarkets, and people go as a tourist town to Taiji to share in a dolphin experience. So they purport to love dolphins. Our first day there, we went to the cove, and there's a pod trapped there in readiness for slaughter the next day. And there was a family, man and his kids, showing kids the dolphins and laughing and giggling. I don't speak Japanese. I got my iPad out and translated through the iPad. Are you aware these animals will be slaughtered tomorrow? He read it. He clearly understood that wanted nothing to do with it. So it's a town built on false pretenses. It has this ugly, ugly secret. You'd say it's not a secret anymore, but it appears to the Japanese people a secret. Holiday makers go about in their happy way in this happy dolphin town, where in the early morning, before the sun comes up, the dolphins are slaughtered each morning.
How do you respond to the argument, which I'm sure you've come across, that we similarly have pig farms and we have, the happy pig face outside the big town where bacon happens, and similarly with our approaches to our own kangaroos, for that matter, when we go hunting them, with all sorts of assurances that we have respect for the kangaroos, but it's necessary.
Of course, I think that one doesn't want to get drawn into a position of saying the way the dolphins are killed is bad and every other way of killing animals is good, and I absolutely don't hold to that position. But I think we can make some distinctions about the intelligence and family nature of dolphins, which puts them into a different category of animals, and we know now much about the
bullshit.
social
Kangaroos
behaviour
have
and the
families
sheer
too.
Intelligence of dolphins. Dolphins have a brain 1.7 kilos. The average human brain is 1.3 kilos. So,
Well, pigs are pretty smart,
Yes, I know pigs also have intelligence, but the rules in modern Western nature for abattoir killing are for humane killing, using stunning. The fundamentals of ensuring that an animal is not aware of its impending death and that it is stunned, becomes insensitive to all feeling instantly, is the fundamental of abattoir killing. Now, we all know that doesn't always happen. We're all very aware of some of our animals in the live export trade, but the way dolphins are first herded, so they have an awareness of their impending death 24 hours before they're killed. These animals know something terrible has happened. They've been trapped in these tiny enclosures. They know something very bad is happening, and then the animals are killed one by one. Each animal takes up to 6 to 8 minutes to die. The others can hear the screaming. With whales, we watched a pod of pilot whales being killed, and those animals are very hard to kill, can take 20 minutes to die. So I don't want to put so much weight on the issue of intelligence, but I think it is important because these animals have such understanding of their fate but just the sheer method of killing is so profoundly cruel, it does distinguish it from killing of farm animals.
Tell me about the campaign that's taking off in a few weeks.
Yes, my daughter and I have created, with the help of a bunch of other people, an organisation called Australia for Dolphins. We've had wonderful support so far. We'll be launching a website, and we hope to get as many members as possible, and we're going to use the money lawfully and respectfully and peacefully to advocate for these wonderful animals. Look, the support we've had has just been amazing. Some wonderful Australians have agreed to support us. People like Fiona Stanley and Gus Nossel, and sports people like Pat Rafter and Sally Pearce and Dawn Fraser, Olivia Newton-John, Michael Caton, just wonderful people who have agreed to lend their support. And we feel very strongly that the Japanese government is at a tipping point. The embarrassment on this issue is building and building, and a number of people who are expert in this area have said that a strong movement from Australia might be the tipping point which stops the whole thing. We really think we have a possibility of bringing this to an end, and the full website will launch shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alistair Lucas, a banker from Melbourne, who also chairs the Macfarlane Burnett Institute there. And a link to Australia for Dolphins can be found on the Science Show website. And we shall have more on that campaign soon in the Science Show.
Yeah, well, the important thing here is that there was absolutely zero Japanese tradition of whaling outside Japanese coastal waters before 1945. During 1943, 44, 45, the Americans mainly, but with a bit of help from the British and the Australians, they put sea mines all around the Japanese coastal waters, sunk nearly all of their merchant shipping and stopped their shipping fleet from operating. At the end of the Second World War, Japan, which traditionally has been a very big eater of seafood, couldn't fish their local coastal waters because of all the mines, and they didn't have the boats anyway. During the Second World War, the only meat which was on sale in the British Isles, unregulated, without a ration ticket, was whale meat. The British ate whales all through the Second World War. They ran their Falkland Islands whaling fleet all through the Second World War. And they had boatloads of frozen whale meat running the gauntlet of the German U-boats to get them up the Atlantic back to Britain. At the end of the Second World War, the English continued eating whales, and the Japanese started coming down into the Southern Ocean and fishing whales because they had nothing else to feed the people in Japan. So the Japanese tradition of eating whales dates back to about 3 weeks after the atom bombing that finished the Second World War. Why they want to skewer dolphins to death, I have no idea. It's apparently just one of those facets of the Japanese cultural psychic makeup. But I find it very unedifying, totally unendearing. And I got to say that fella's idea of a kangaroo's understanding of what happens when a kangaroo shooter comes within a kilometre of the mob, he's got a very deficient idea. I can have 6 or 8 kangaroos sitting on my lawn here, and when they hear the suspension rattle and the exhaust note and the gear change technique of a particular vehicle from which they have been shot at on previous occasions, as that vehicle is on my neighbour's driveway 350 odd metres away, all the kangaroos in my clearing sit up, look at each other and hop away in the direction of the thickest, most rocky, timbered parts of the block where nobody in a vehicle can approach. Because they know at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when they hear that guy show up, they know that after the sun goes down, he's going to be driving around on my neighbour's place with a spotlight and a telescopic sight on a high-powered rifle, and if they're out there where they can see the light, they know they're going to be hopeless, helpless, unable to move, and they're going to get shot at. Several of them have bullet marks on their ears. Well, kangaroo's brain size is nothing like a human brain size. If a dolphin brain is bigger than a human brain, and body weight for body weight we're probably about the same, then the idea of these barbaric, quote, fishermen, unquote, herding dolphins into a cove and hammering steel skewers into the back of their skulls and then chocking the hole with a lump of wood and a hammer to stop them from bleeding, it is totally barbaric. So I applaud those who are trying to get the Japanese to see reason and stop doing that. Surely we've killed enough of the fish in the ocean and we've got rid of enough of the cetaceans. 200 years ago, when English people first showed up in Australia, in Tasmania, at the Derwent River, they couldn't row a boat across the river, which is over a mile wide, because there were so many southern right whales in the estuary that a rowboat wouldn't float. It would get crushed by the whales. They were that thick. We have just about sterilised the ocean. And it's time the bloody Japanese stopped killing whales and stopped killing dolphins. That's my pontification for the afternoon. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.